Hello and welcome to 7 Skills for the Future podcast. My name is Emma Sue and this podcast is all about developing 7 skills: adaptability, empathy, critical thinking, integrity, being optimistic, being proactive and resilience. And today I'm delighted to be talking to Viv Groskop. Viv is a comedian, a journalist and an author, and she's written this great book called How to Own the Room. And this is targeted at women, about finding your voice, about presenting and being confident. So today I'm going to talk to Viv about adaptability and resilience. And she's also got some great tips if you are about to give a presentation in the near future or go into a meeting that might be challenging for you. Just some great tips on how to own the room. So hi Viv, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you with us today.
Hi Emma Sue, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I think really the first thing I need to do is just to thank you for writing this incredible book, How to Own the Room.
Oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for reading it and for getting it. You know, the most important thing for any author is to feel that the people who get their work in their hands actually get it. You know, sometimes it's difficult to get your book into the hands of the right person, and I feel like this book has really been resonating with the people I meant to write it for, so that's amazing.
Well, I can only say that it's been so helpful to me, and it's just a fantastic thing that you're doing. And I want to ask you really how you came to be writing that book, and why is it such a popular topic right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in some ways the answer is huge, and there are so many reasons why suddenly this whole area of women's empowerment, women's inspiration has really exploded. But in other ways, it's almost impossible to explain because I think that a lot of women have wanted for a long time to be able to talk about these things, you know, how to overcome doubt, how to overcome anxiety. And there have been lots of little steps, I would say, over the last few decades, from, you know, starting with Germaine Greer's work or Gloria Steinem, and then in the modern era, things like Lean In from Sheryl Sandberg. And I think there's been a disconnect that is finally coming to light, where we start to acknowledge that we know women have all of these strengths. We know the institutional barriers that they face. But what are we actually going to do about it? I think that's finally coming to light, and we're all finally discussing it. And my end of things is looking at the individual and saying, look, I recognize the institutional context. I recognize all the barriers that we face because of things like Me Too and Time's Up and the glass. But what can you as an individual get up today, this morning, and change about yourself that's going to help?
Yes.
And I'm quite interested, very recently when Michelle Obama was in London, one of the comments that she made in an interview was about the limits of Lean In. And she was saying, as part of her book tour, that there are only so many ways in which you can lean in, and actually you can't always change things, and you have to accept that it's going to take a long time for things to change, or that sometimes only legislation can change certain things. And I think when it comes to equal pay and things like that, sometimes that's an extremely valid reaction. But for me, I guess the message I'm putting across with How to Own the Room is don't give up on leaning in and find ways to inspire yourself, find ways to motivate yourself, find ways to help other women, find ways to step up. And I'm not saying that that's a magic bullet, or suddenly if you speak in a certain way, or you sit in a meeting in a certain way, or learn how to not be interrupted, that it's going to fix everything. It's not. But in the short term, the methods that I'm advocating and the women that I'm using as inspiration, I think are real fodder for your morale for getting through this.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying about the small steps is really important, because actually that's to do with being proactive, that's to do with looking at yourself, and by making these very small changes in behavior, you actually do start to change not only perhaps the way that you speak and talk about your work and yourself, but also the wider issues that you've been mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some small way, it can help you, and it can also help other women who are watching you. Yes. So that's also great advice for anyone who's feeling nervous about changing the way that they present or changing the way they show up in meetings, is don't just think about you and what people are going to be thinking about you, but think about how you would feel if other women started to do this, because you would probably feel pretty inspired by it, and it would make you feel that you've got allies.
Yes.
And I think that can be a really helpful way to think of things.
Yes. I mean, I think one of the things that struck me most about your fantastic podcast that goes with the book is something I listened to just before I was about to give a keynote. And it was just the simplest of steps. And one of them was about just caring for your audience. And exactly what you're saying is actually I've been asked to give this keynote, and I've got a duty to my audience to make them feel comfortable, and for the women perhaps in the audience to be inspired by some of the things that I'm talking about. So that resonated a lot with me, as well as some of the very tiny things that you suggest, what some of your the people that you've interviewed suggest, simple things like changing the shoes that you wear, or looking the part when you're getting up to speak.
Yeah, the advice that I'm giving is everything from really tiny things to the bigger picture. The small things are things like giving yourself time to do a relaxation exercise before a big moment, like an interview or a speech. So you sit down, you allow yourself to breathe through your feet. That's something that's really, really powerful. Imagine you've got nostrils in the soles of your feet, and you're breathing up through those. And imagine that your brain is sinking down into your stomach. And that really helps you. If you can just imagine that, brain and stomach, breathe through feet, sit and do that for 2 minutes. It's incredibly relaxing, and it literally takes you out of your head.
Yes.
So you stop imagining so many things, and you just go very still and quiet, and be focused on the feelings in your body, and try not to dispel them. So I think often when we're feeling nervous, we're thinking, how can I get rid of these nerves?
Yes.
But those breathing exercises actually help you to accept those nerves, because they're completely natural and they show that you care.
Yes.
So there are lots of small things like that.
Yes.
But there are also the bigger ideas where you're thinking about other people in the room. And for me, this is something that actually, it's been quite selfish for me to think about this sometimes, because it's just helped me so much. I don't really care that it's selfish. It's that you recognize in any situation that you're going into, you are not the most important person. Everybody else is more important than you are. And you think about the fact that people in your audience could be one person in an interview, or a difficult conversation, or it could be 2,000 people, or it could be millions of people if it's a TED. You think about all the things that they might be going through that they're not able to talk about. So they could be going through financial problems. They could be just having received news that a relative has got a terrible disease. They could be feeling really rough and hungover. There's all kinds of things that your audience is going through that they can't articulate. And all they want is to be able to sit with you in this moment and get through it.
Yes.
You to all achieve whatever objectives you're there for.
Yes.
And that's actually incredibly relaxing. Remind yourself that you're part of a community, you're part of a tribe. It's not all on you. In that particular moment, yes, you're there to serve. You're there to serve whatever purpose you're there for. So just serve your purpose as well as you can on that day and get out.
Yes. And that's so helpful, I think, because we do tend to be very just sort of naturally kind of self-obsessed. We focus on ourselves. I'm going up there to speak, and I'm doing this, and I'm, I've got me, and actually to turn that on its head and just have empathy for the audience is so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so easy when you actually think about this and you focus on it. It makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize what you're really there for, because you're not really there to show everyone how fabulous you are. You're really there to help things along, whatever the thing is. You know, the thing might be, are you the right person for this job? Yes or no? You know, are you offering a contribution to your industry which may or may not be helpful? You know, those things are quite easy and open. And reminding yourself that this moment is not the be all and end all. It's not necessarily for you to prove that you're the most excellent person in the universe. And I've learned all of this the hard way from stand-up, which I've been, you know, performing for almost 10 years now.
Yes.
And in the early days of performing that, you feel extremely vulnerable, and you feel as if it's all about you, and everyone's looking at you and thinking, oh, she's rubbish. Or sometimes the opposite of that can be really stressful, of, oh my God, she's really amazing and this is incredible. Those things can both be very burdensome.
Yeah.
You learn how to listen to the audience, how to be there for them. You learn not to judge them if you're just not quite the right person for them on that particular day. And you learn that one performance is just one performance, and it's one of hundreds that you're going to be making throughout your life.
Yes.
And you learn to not put yourself under so much pressure. Like, you might be having an off day. The audience might be having an off day. Just do your best and get through it.
Yeah. Now, I want to just talk a bit about your podcast and some of these incredible women that you've been interviewing, and what sort of struck you about their stories. What are some of the highlights of the interviews that you've been hosting?
The most extraordinary interview I did was with Mary Beard, the classicist. And the only way I could get an interview with her, because she's incredibly busy, was to drive her to somewhere that she needed to go. I realized that was where the window was in this drive time. And so I asked her, and she thought this would be quite a fun idea, and it you know, killed lots of birds with one stone. So we set off on this extraordinary journey. I picked her up from Heathrow Terminal 5 and drove her to Cheltenham, where she had a lot of speaking engagements. And we were able to have this fantastic conversation that I knew was in there, where she can not only talk about her own experiences of public speaking and of showing up in difficult circumstances, managing difficult faculty meetings, being a young academic and trying to get your own lecture style so that everybody comes to your lectures and not to everyone else's. And she talks about the fear of having an empty lecture hall. You know, she still lives with that fear, because for her, she lives or dies by whether her students are compelled by her.
Yes.
You know, she doesn't really care so much about you know, having the top rating BBC history show. For her, the measure of her success, that's a bonus, and she enjoys it and she wants it to be good. But for her, the measure of her success is, you know, Monday morning, 10 o'clock, is the lecture hall full. And if it's not, then she's not doing a good enough job. So that was really fascinating to me. So she combines all of that experience with an incredible awareness of the history of public speaking.
Right, yes.
From classical times, where public speaking was regarded as what they called a virtue. And although I'd studied Latin at school, I'd completely forgotten that the word virtue includes the word vir, V-I-R, which means man in Latin. And the whole idea of public speaking and virtue, which were combined in classical times to mean the mark of a good person, that virtue can only be assigned to a male person. So the whole history of public speaking from ancient times was designed specifically to exclude women. And that to me was the absolute highlight of all of the interviews that I've done, because it grounded the context that we're living in and reminded me what we're up against, because it is very difficult for women to speak out and be great speakers and own the space and own the room. And that's not just because of the contemporary difficulties that we face. it's because historically it was wrong for women to speak. And you gained more virtue, and she explained this very brilliantly. You gained more virtue not only if you were a brilliant public speaker yourself, but if you actively prevented women from speaking. That was part of the deal.
Right.
That was part of the contract.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're talking like 2,000 years ago now, so it's not as if we face this, but I think these things are all somewhere deep in all of our subconscious and our unconscious.
Yeah.
We've grown, we've lived through this history, and hearing that from her was just completely fascinating. And it was a great reminder of the message I'm always trying to put across, that women have only really been doing this work publicly for about 100 years, because we've only been educated, literate for that time. It's true.
Well, when you stop to think about this, it's actually, you start realizing just how, it's shocking it is. And of course it explains why there are all these emotions and feelings and perceptions about women speaking out. I mean, it really does, those things are embedded, aren't they? And they sort of, even though 100 years is not a very long time, still it's embedded in our psyches, I think, somewhere, like, as you were saying before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some ways it's incredibly refreshing and relaxing to think about this, because you just think, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I need to set all of that to one side and do what I'm come here to do. I often say to women I'm working with in a corporate context, if I'm helping them to prepare a speech or I'm helping them to change something in their working culture, that the weight of all this is so great. You can't possibly hope to overturn the patriarchy in one speech, or even a series of speeches, or in a 3-year-long initiative to change things at work. You have to adopt a position and you have to manage your morale so that you're in this for the long haul. Yes. And recognizing the weight of all of this, whilst realizing all of that is so big, you can't just overturn it in one go. Yeah. You have to just find a way to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, when I'm just listening to you talk about your work, I get the sense that what you're doing now is what you really love and you're passionate about. So I want to talk a bit about that. What drives that, and what makes you happy, and how do you balance it all with everything? How do you do what you do?
Well, very easily in some ways, not very easily in others. I've been freelance for almost 20 years now. So I've always worked for myself, and I really value independence and freedom in my work. And I love to be self-motivated. I don't particularly like doing what other people tell me to do. So I've always valued having my own ideas and finding a way to make them work. That hasn't always been easy, and there are lots of downsides to that kind of work. And I think what it's led me to realize is that the most important thing in your work is to find the thing that's attuned to your personality, and be very honest with yourself about what you can and can't live with. So a lot of the things that are downsides for me, such as, my income can be very precarious and can be very, very up and down. I can make a lot of money one year and very little money the next year. I can have projects that seem to be really big and exciting and amount to nothing. I can have projects that are teeny tiny and seem completely inconsequential, and suddenly they blow up into something really exciting. It's incredibly unpredictable, and I know that would be really difficult for some people to manage, but I really thrive on that, and I've learned to offset some of the downsides and really manage my morale. That was one of the best pieces of advice I ever had. When I was a young journalist in my early 20s, I met Marcel Dargy-Smith, who was the editor of Cosmopolitan then, and I'd read the magazine for years as a teenager, and she'd always been the editor, and I revered her. And I was lucky enough to have this interview with her, and eventually went on to do some work experience on the magazine when I was about 22. And she said, if you ever go freelance as a writer, my advice to you is manage your morale, which is about make sure that you're not trapped in a room on your own for days on end, pitching to people who are rejecting your ideas. Make sure that you get into offices with people from time to time. Make sure that you build a network. Make sure that you build in the opportunity for downtime. Make sure that you build in a little nest egg so that you can say no to work that you don't really want to do. All of that goes towards managing your morale. So I've not always been successful at that, and it astounds me sometimes after 20 years of working for myself that I still make mistakes. And at the end of realizing that I've made a mistake, I'll be thinking, oh yeah, that's because I didn't manage my morale. And so you're always learning. In terms of the balance of things, I have 3 children aged 8, 12 and 15. And I have long been a devotee of something that Davina McCall talks about, which is ditching the guilt. I think as parents, and I mean this for men as well as women, because I think that often we forget that men are just as engaged with their children as women are. I don't believe in the idea of women as primary carers. I think that both parents should be equal carers, and I really take my hat off to single parents out there. People who don't have any choice but to be the primary carer. But we're so prone to guilt, men and women, towards our children, and I think that's a sign that you're a good parent. And I'm careful not to waste time feeling guilty about things that I can't change or I don't want to change. So if I am feeling guilty about something, say I've missed such and such carol concert or such and such sports day because I had a work meeting, then I'll think, do I really feel guilty about this, or is that just regular parenting guilt that's going to be a waste of time? And if I really feel guilty about something, I will change it. So I will cancel the meeting, or I will rearrange my schedule so I'm spending more with that child because they need me more at that particular time. I won't waste pointless time on guilt. So for me, it's about action. You know, either it's bad enough that you need to act, or if you don't need to act, then don't waste your time on it.
So what you're saying, some of the things that you're saying here really resonate with 3 of the skills that are part of the 7 that are connected with this podcast and with my book. But you're talking about resilience, being proactive, and optimism. And some of the things that you're describing there are characteristic of building resilience. So would you say that you are a resilient person? You certainly come across that way to me.
Yeah, I'm definitely a resilient person. That would probably be my most prominent of the 7 skills. And I think resilience is something that a lot of people are born with, a natural aptitude towards it. But I also think it's a muscle that can be developed. And I think even if you are a fairly resilient person, your resilience can be really challenged in certain situations and almost disappear. You know, I think it when you move through life, there are certain situations that regard so much resilience that even the most naturally resilient person will crumble. I think it's something that you can always work on and you can always develop. And it really helps, I think, to talk to other people who are going through similar things. So that's what's always helped me as a freelancer, is knowing that other writers are having their work rejected. They've had their proposal turned down by a publisher. Other comedians have been blanked by such and such promoter, or they haven't got anywhere with this producer. You know, it's not just me. You know, other people are having difficulties marketing their Edinburgh show, or, you know, all of these things. They help you to build your resilience because they make you realize, oh yeah, this is not my problem. Or even better, when you do realize it is your problem and no one else is suffering from this, so you better fix something about yourself, and quick. And these are really helpful because all really life is, I mean, I sound like some kind of weird American coach now, but all life is really about is, what's the next action that you need to take? You know, is there an action? And the action might be doing nothing, or the action might be just go chill out and have a day with your friends, or the action might be, you know, send 50 emails to your contacts to help with whatever you're doing. Resilience, shared resilience, I think, is really helpful.
I mean, I often say to people that the most important thing you can be doing is what's right in front of you. So, if you're in a meeting, that's the most important thing. Be present, listen. If you're with your child, that's the most important thing. If you're taking part in an interview, that's the most important thing. And that if you can do that, actually, it is easy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a cliche to say it, but I think nowadays our attention is so divided. Our attention is under threat in a way that it never has been historically, because of all the digital advances, where we're being asked to split our attention constantly between the phone, the email, apps, the social media, this demand, that demand, this distraction, and to actually be focused on what's in front of us and connect with people or deal with an irritating obligation that we don't want to deal with. Those things are really, really hard.
Yeah. And I think it's something hopefully we're getting more aware of the need to be present and to be focused. But how do you personally manage all of that yourself? What do you do?
I think I'm a terrible role model for this. I take a certain pride in being 45 and not feeling out of touch with technology. So in some ways I allow myself to spend a lot of time on social media and apps and keep up with all those things. And my excuse is, well, I don't want to become an old person. But the truth is I probably spend too much time on all of those things, and I'm always trying to find ways to spend less time on a screen and more time thinking. And I know from my work as well, it's really interesting with the book, How to Own the Room, that what I love most of all is connecting with the people who've read it, or connecting with people who are interested in the ideas in it, and being face to face with them and showing them the techniques that are in the book.
Yeah.
So I love to be in a room of, 200 people at a festival, and I'm teaching them how to do the breathe through the soles of your feet and let your brain fall into your stomach. Or we're doing, I talk about tapping, emotional freedom techniques. So you would say, although I feel nervous, I will perform well. Or although I am stressed, I've got this. And you just tap and you repeat and repeat and repeat, and that's incredibly relaxing. And again, it encourages you to get out of your head and get into your body. And I love to be in a room with people doing that, and I'd much rather do that than be hunched over my phone sending tweets. And so that's, I think, one of my, I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. I believe in all round the year resolutions, and one of my constant resolutions is to be a better role model to other people about social media. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. So in the same way, when you prepare a speech or you have a moment where you're going to be in front of a big group of people, you don't think about yourself, think about them and what they need. With social media, I'm often thinking, well, if other people are looking at me and seeing how much I'm on it, is that really inspiring to them? Is that really helpful? And I think if more of us could role model responsible, helpful behavior around social media, then the world would be a better place.
Yeah, no, it's true. And
we're very caught up in it, and I mean that completely unjudgmentally, because I'm very caught up in it. But it's a big challenge, and I think sometimes we will look back on this time and see social media in the same way that we saw cigarettes 50s. It's just about balance. I mean, I would never have found you had it not been for social media. So there's so many positive things about it, but it's just having that balance, isn't it? Yeah,
really?
There are so many positives. And one of the messages in How to Own the Room is about being encouraged as an introvert and seeking out brilliant footage from TED Talks, like people like Susan Cain or Amy Cuddy, who are quite introverted, or even actually Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
She's, beautiful speaker, but quite introverted. And we wouldn't have access to those things if it wasn't the internet. So I think it's a fantastic connector and a fantastic encourager of people. It allows you to see the breadth of ability, and allows you to access, this is one of the reasons that people are obsessed now with women speaking and encouraging women speakers and having more women on panels, and not just because these things are important and the right thing to do, which they are, but because we see how limitless the possibilities are. And we only see that because of the advent of YouTube, TED Talks, Instagram stories. This is the first time in history any woman who wants to speak and have her voice heard can do it. You can broadcast on Instagram TV today. And that's fascinating and terrifying and amazing.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I just feel we could keep talking for another couple of hours. There's just lots of things that you've been touching on which are so resonant. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I know that our listeners, we'll have listeners from all over the world listening to this. And if any of them are about to go into a speaking situation or a situation where they're feeling nervous, what are maybe 3 things you could advise right now for those people that might be listening?
For anyone who's preparing something that is high stakes, it's very easy to give into the nerves. So my first tip would be reassure yourself and make it easier for yourself by giving yourself a really, really strong intro and a really strong conclusion. So make sure you know the first 3 sentences you're going to say and the last 3 sentences that you're going to say, and make sure you know them off heart and you can say them so easily that it doesn't sound as if you've learned them. And the middle bit can be almost completely improvised. Second tip is aim to say less than you have planned. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of speakers make, and I know this from working with people preparing quite complicated speeches, is they try to get into one speech the content of about 10 speeches. You need to say a lot less than you think. So think about your audience and maybe the one key message that you want them to take away. And all you have to do in your speech is just illustrate that key message and illustrate it as simply and as memorably as you can. The third thing I would say is have fun. And I don't mean you have to dress up in a clown costume and go on laughing and make jokes. Although if you want to do that, then please be my guest. I'd be thrilled. Please take a video and upload it. But find a way to make this fun for you. So find something in the speech that is amusing to you or inspiring or that constitutes fun. For some people, fun is an amazingly complicated graph about asset management. That's some people's idea of fun. For another person, it could be some slides that represent things that really inspire you or that are a bit quirky or eccentric. For another person, it could be quoting someone who really inspires you. But find the fun in it. And this is a great lesson for work as well. I think if you keep looking for fun, then it's much easier to keep going, and it's much easier when things go wrong. And it's also a fantastic indicator of whether you're not quite in the right place. So if you're preparing a speech and there's literally nothing about it that is fun for you, that for me rings an alarm bell that maybe you're not quite in the right space. Are you in the right job at the moment? Is this the right topic for you to be presenting on? Why are you really doing this? There's no fun is a massive red flag. So find the fun, and if you can, show that in your face to the audience. And lo and behold, they will find it fun as well. And I'm so amazed that they found your graph about asset management fun. But fun is the most contagious thing for anyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And please, can you also tell our listeners where they can find your podcast and where they can find out more about you? Because I know that they're going to be really keen to know more.
Hello, listeners. My podcast is on iTunes and Acast. If you go to my Twitter or Instagram, which is at Viv Groskop, VIVGROSKOP, that's VIVGROSKOP, then the links for the podcast and the book book are on both of those. The book's available on Amazon. It's just sold to Canada, hopefully coming to the US soon, but you can order it from UK Amazon with international delivery. And if you do listen to the podcast or you do check out the book, then please do leave me a review, warts and all, because I love to get people's feedback, so the next thing that I can do can be even better.
Thank you. And I can definitely vouch for both podcast and book. Get out there and listen to that podcast and buy that book, because they're both absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Viv, for coming onto the show. It's been an honour to have you and to interview you. And I'm just so pleased, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. Go own the room.
So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the interview with Viv as much as I've enjoyed talking to her. If you'd like to know more about the 7 skills, you can buy the book, 7 Skills for the Future. If you'd like some ideas and tips for how to develop those 7 skills, then go to the website unimentor.com and look under 7 skills, and you'll find everything you need there. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.